The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone. Good day, and welcome to the Genesis Zone Show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this beautiful Friday. With skepticism over Big Pharma wonder drugs, as well as skepticism over mainstream medical establishment growing by the day, there are other options for managing anxiety symptoms, contrary to popular belief. In today's episode, I'll be discussing the scientific evidence for alternative therapies that may be beneficial for symptoms associated with anxiety. And here's a secret: I'll be sharing 6 natural supplements and 4 alternative therapies. So if you're one of us who tries to avoid the sickness care system, stay tuned. But before we get started, let's recap the top nuggets from yesterday's interview with Manya Chelinsky. Now, in yesterday's segment with our Wellness Warrior segment with Manya Chelinsky, she shared with us her experience of being at ground zero the day of the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. If you missed that episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. She shared with us the emotional and physical symptoms that significantly impacted her life that first year, and to some degree still is affecting her today. She shared with us how not having a physical injury or physical scars resulted in a disconnect in services available for those impacted with emotional or mental scars versus physical. Now, Manya used this disconnect to fuel a passion for becoming a powerful advocate for survivors of emotional and mental trauma. And she left us with some tips for healing through trauma. Number 1, she said, stop beating yourself up. We all heal in our own time and in our own way. She went on to add that normal is different for everybody. So try not to fall into that trap of beating yourself up and saying this is not normal, when in reality, because it's your normal, it's okay, and you need to kind of roll with it. Whether everybody else rolls with it or not, it really doesn't matter. This is your journey. The number 2 thing she shared with us is realize that you're not alone. She shared a statistic that I thought was absolutely amazing. 60% of adult men and 50% of adult women will experience at least one trauma in their life. And number 3, she said, realize it's normal to be distressed after something horrible happens to you, and don't allow others to define that journey. And lastly, number 4, trust in yourself and the skills you've built up over the course of your life, and trust that you will pick up new skills on your recovery journey. Now let's explore how these nuggets fit into the Genesis Zone show and the Genesis Zone Advantage. So this brings us to today's topic. Now, Manya Chelinsky and I spent a good amount of time talking about the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and the impact, both long and short term, of PTSD on a person's life. Now, PTSD is a type of anxiety disorder that, in my professional opinion, is very complex. Now, for the sake of today's show, I want to focus on the anxiety component only. Not because PTSD isn't important. It truly is. And in my opinion, it's grossly underdiagnosed. But often when a survivor of trauma works through the initial phases of recovery, they're left with unexplained anxiety. And oftentimes it's anxiety that comes out of nowhere, that are triggered by things that they don't even realize are triggers. So the reason I want to focus on anxiety in today's show is because statistically, anxiety disorders comprise the largest group of diagnosed mental health disorders on the planet. In fact, just in the United States alone, over 40 million people have an anxiety diagnosis of some kind. But when I'm speaking about anxiety in today's show, I'm not necessarily talking about a disorder or a diagnosis so much as I am a cluster of symptoms. It's simply easier for the layperson, anyone listening in the listening audience, to identify anxiety in themselves and maybe even in their loved ones if we focus on the symptoms instead of diagnoses. Well, what are some anxiety symptoms, you may be asking? Well, it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to answer it. And I'm going to list a few. Now, this list is fairly long, but I want you to wrap your head around all the symptoms, or at least some of the major symptoms that comprise anxiety disorders. Number one is worry. Number two is muscle tension. Then chest pain and heart palpitations, or heart fluttering or heart racing. Flushing or blushing of the face or even the chest. Breathing difficulties or constricted breathing, feeling like you have an elephant sitting on your chest. And if these sound eerily familiar to a heart attack, there's a good reason, because the number one false diagnosis, or the not false diagnosis, but the number one reason people pop into an emergency room for symptoms of a heart attack is anxiety. Now, truly, some of them turn out to be a cardiac issue, but most of the time they're anxiety issues. And ER physicians and medical professionals will tell you this happens all the time. Other things that can happen, anxiety symptoms: dry mouth, difficulty concentrating or foggy thinking, fear of social situations, being easily fatigued even can be a symptom, dizziness or nausea, social avoidance, emotional outburst, agitation or irritability, sweating or sweaty palms. Sweaty palms are very common. Headaches, trembling, restlessness, or even pacing. Numbness or tingling in the hands, feet, or face, really, really common symptom. Sleep disturbances, stomach cramps or stomach upset, under-eating or overeating. And think, this list is only a partial list. These are only some of the common symptoms. And I always say that anxiety is a wicked little beast and can shut the strongest of people down. So what can you do about these symptoms if you're caught struggling with these symptoms? Let's look at the research. As Manya mentioned in her interview yesterday, she sought the help of a therapist. So let's look at the research about therapy, what therapy has to do as far as helping with anxiety. Cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, works like a charm when it comes to treating anxiety. It's probably one of the most researched therapy modalities, in fact, for treating anxiety and depression. CBT is very effective. In fact, if you put head-to-head studies with medication and CBT, CBT is equally as effective as medication in most studies. So Manya also mentioned mindfulness and meditation. Well, as it turns out, there's also research to show that mindfulness exercise and meditative work actually is very effective at decreasing anxiety. The next thing is aerobic exercise. Now, this one, maybe, you kind of guessed that it could be, but you may not have known that there was research to back it up. There's a ton of research. And by the way, for those of you guys who are listening, I will be publishing in the show notes later on the actual links to these studies, so you won't have to worry about looking them up yourself. I'll put links to the studies. Obviously, I can't put all of them because there are a ton of them, but I put the main ones that I looked at when I created this show today. But aerobic exercise has very strong effect for decreasing anxiety. Now, you may be asking, what about resistance training? What about weight training? Well, as it turns out, in the past few years, there's actually been some research coming up that's actually showing that weight training or resistance training is also beginning to show benefits. So I always tell people to create a mix of exercise. You want some cardio or aerobic exercise, and you want some weight training exercise mixed in. Regardless, you're going to see a benefit in decreasing anxiety. So now let's take a look at some alternative therapies that may not be on your radar. One is kava. That's spelled Kava. Now, there are 8 studies with kava. This is a root similar to a taro root, but it's a root that's found in the Pacific Island chains. And it's been used medicinally for thousands of years. And it is notoriously effective at decreasing anxiety. Now, the problem with kava is this. It's so effective at decreasing anxiety that there are some experts who are naturopathic, medicine, herbally focused, that say, this is one that is so potent and pretty much equally as potent as prescription medications that we may need to watch this one a little bit closely. And we need some more studies, some long-term studies, to see if there's an addictive potential with kava. Personally, I've had clients that have used it long-term, and they use it sometimes consistently for a month or two during high periods of stress, and then they come off of it and with no difficulties and no withdrawals. I do see that with prescription medications. I see withdrawal problems all the times, but with kava, I've not seen that clinically. That's Dr. Brian Brown's take on that, just from a clinical perspective, not from a study perspective. There actually needs to be some more studies done with kava to make sure that it doesn't have an addictive potential. However, preliminarily, I don't think it does. So ashwagandha is the next one. That's a mouthful, and I'm not going to worry about spelling it for you because it's spelled pretty much like it sounds. But ashwagandha is an ancient adaptogenic medicinal herb out of the Middle East. And what do I mean when I say adaptogenic? Well, adaptogens adapt to the environment around them. So if you're under periods of high stress, meaning your cortisol may tend to be a little bit higher, ashwagandha is really good at bringing that cortisol down. If you're under periods of stress burnout, so you've been under stress so long that your cortisol levels are now plummeting, ashwagandha has a tendency to raise those cortisol levels beautifully. This was discovered in the Middle East and in India, and it's been used in Ayurvedic medicine as one of the mainstay treatments for many conditions over the past 3,000 to 5,000 years. And a lot of people don't realize that some of these herbal remedies have been in existence for a long time, but it is best used just for overall general anxiety symptoms. Now, the next one I want to talk to you about is inositol. Now, inositol is a type of naturally occurring sugar. Now, don't get twisted with that sugar thing and say, oh, I've got to stay away from it because I try to eat low carb. No, it's not that kind of sugar. What I'm talking about is biochemically, it is classified as a sugar, but this particular sugar is found in very high levels in the brain. So under periods of stress, guess what? You deplete inositol at extremely rapid rates. The other flip side of that is there's some amazing research to show that inositol being a quote unquote sugar chemically actually helps improve insulin resistance. So you think, well, wait a minute. I thought we were supposed to stay away from sugar in order to improve insulin resistance. Yeah, but, and I don't want to go down that road because that's not the topic of today, but I did want to tell you that inositol, even though it's classified as a sugar, it actually improves insulin resistance. But inositol in the 4 studies that I looked at is best overall for panic disorder type symptoms. So if you're struggling with just sudden burst of feeling like you're losing control, heart racing, shortness of breath, and you have that flood of adrenaline, like you're just panicked, inositol may be one of those things that helps control that. Again, I'll provide the links to the study so you can look at them yourself. The next one I want to talk to you about is lavender. So with essential oils being all the rage over the past few years, lavender has gotten a lot of attention. And lavender is very calming. In fact, there are 5 studies that show that lavender is really good for controlling the actual diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. Now, lavender is a medicinal flower used in herbal remedies all over the world. It's found on almost every single continent in the world. I'll tell you a really funny story about lavender. So some really good friends of ours, their daughter was getting married in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. If you've never been out there, it's beautiful. It's wine country. It's just rolling hills. It's just lush green and beautiful. And so we went out to Oregon for this wedding. It was at a botanical garden, and there just happened to be private cabins on this botanical garden property. We stayed at one of the cabins. And the day of the wedding, I'd been noticing this lavender all over the place, and it just was an intoxicating smell in the air with this blooming lavender. And I thought, man, those flowers are so beautiful. They just deserve to be smelled. So I walked up to a whole patch of lavender. Now, this is, mind you, this is right as I'm getting ready to walk into the wedding. And I bent down and I smelled that lavender, and I had orange pollen all over my beard and my face and my nose. And I started sneezing like crazy. My eyes started watering. I got overdosed on lavender. Now, I was really calm for the rest of the evening, but I had to go back to the room and wash that off my face and flush with plenty of water because I'd gotten overdosed on lavender. But the moral of the story there is never stick your face in a lavender flower and inhale. It's probably not a good thing for you. But there are actually 5 studies that look at generalized anxiety, the benefits of lavender with generalized anxiety. Now, the next one is a little bit difficult to pronounce, but it's Bacopa monnieri. Now, there are 2 studies that are actually, and all of these studies that I'm talking to you about have consistent results among all the studies. So it's not like one study showed benefit and the next study didn't, or the next 2 didn't. All of these studies that I was looking at is that they showed consistent benefit. So Bacopa monnieri is more for preventing the rise in anxiety from occurring in the first place. So it's more of a preventive measure. It's not one that is really good to take in the moment when you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, but it is really good to take as a preventive on a regular basis. As a side note, it's exceptionally good for, and this is really good, for speeding up learning and memory capacity. We call that neuroplasticity. So if you see some of these companies out there that actually create brain formulas, oftentimes they'll have Bacopa monnieri in them because they actually improve neuroplasticity, or your ability to learn new information and your ability to store that information that you've learned and recall it. So it's very good for that. The Bacopa monnieri is also an Ayurvedic medicine, been used for thousands of years. It's actually a beautiful little plant. It's a ground cover that has these beautiful little white flowers all over them. It pretty much can be found on most every continent throughout the world, but a very interesting plant medicinally, very good for preventing anxiety, very good for brain health. The next one is not a supplement at all. And I hesitated to put this in there, but I thought, no, people need to hear this because I've used this very effectively in clinical practice for years. So it's binaural beats, Binaural, binaural beats. There are actually 3 studies with binaural beats, and they studied, now a binaural beat, let me explain this. A binaural beat is an electronic pulsation created by a pulse generator. Oftentimes you clip them on your ears, or sometimes you can play them. They'll have binaural beats that play through music in the background of really soothing music, and it's pulsating. You just can't hear it with the perception of your ear. But this binaural beat at a delta wave or an alpha wave frequency is very calming. So I looked at 3 studies related to binaural beats. And what I found is very consistent results when it comes to pre-surgery anxiety. So when these are used in surgery centers for people who had high anxiety going into surgery, it calmed them down before they even had anesthesia, or before they had any type of preoperative medication to calm them down. It just brought their anxiety down. Interesting, there was a study that showed post-operative pain management was also better with the use of binaural beats before surgery. So they found that morphine used post-surgery for orthopedic surgery was reduced by 50% just by using binaural beats prior to surgery. That's amazing results, guys. Now, I have a machine that is it's a medical office grade machine. It's called an Alpha Stem, and it only works with an alpha wave frequency. But I can speed up that. I can change that frequency, alter that frequency, set it on a timer, do different things with it. But that particular device was created by a company that worked specifically with the VA health system for veterans that had post-traumatic stress disorder. So binaural beats ties back into Manya Cholinsky's topic of post-traumatic stress disorder, in that it has research behind it, especially on the alpha wave frequency for helping with post-traumatic stress disorder. I love alpha wave technology and delta wave technology through binaural beats. Absolutely amazing. And the last one I'm going to talk to you about today is CBD. Now, CBD comes from a hemp plant, not a cannabis plant. It is in the cannabis family, but it doesn't have THC. Okay, so it doesn't have the illegal drug in it. CBD is an extract from the hemp plant, and there are actually 5 short-term studies that show that it is effective for anxiety. The problem with these studies is that they're too short-term. We actually need some longer-term studies to show whether or not CBD is effective long-term. Here's what I found clinically, because with CBD shops popping up all over the place, more and more people are trying this. If you get a CBD isolate, it doesn't work that well. So basically what that means is there's a company that has isolated CBD from the hemp plant. They put it in a crystalline form, and then another company comes along, buys the crystalline form and puts it in a bottle and puts olive oil or some other type of oil in there, grapeseed oil often, to reconstitute it and turn it into a CBD oil, a consumable oil. The problem with that is it's not whole plant. So what we're learning about CBD is that the nearly 100 other neuroactive chemicals in the hemp plant work in conjunction with CBD to make it work best. So make sure when you're buying or purchasing CBD, make sure you're getting a whole plant CBD product, not an isolate. Isolate products are no good. Don't waste your money on them. They'll overcharge you for them and you won't get any benefit from it. So if you've been hanging around me very long, you know that I'm a huge proponent of starting with genetic testing first. My mantra has been and always will be: test, don't guess. It's truly the fastest way to get lasting results. And what I'm talking about is getting genetic testing done is truly the fastest way to get lasting results. And it can save you a ton of valuable time and money. Let me share a story of a client I've worked with in the past few years. Now, this particular person is a business professional in their early 40s, and their job required of them to be at social events to glad hand and close big sales. The problem that they had is they struggled with significant anxiety, and they had struggled with significant anxiety since their teenage years. There was no trauma that we could identify. It was just a pure anxiety disorder. So per usual, start with genetic testing, and we worked from there. Now, this person had been tried on multiple medications and had to stop them for one reason or the other. Number one, they didn't like it. Number two, it didn't work. Number three, it had horrible side effects. So they stopped these medications, and they had just been unsuccessful with it. This person was an exercise fanatic. So they had aerobic exercise and weightlifting exercise down pat. They admitted that did help with their anxiety, but it needed to be on a very recurring basis. And oftentimes they couldn't overcome that anxiety even by exercising when they were in social situations. So I tested their genetics, and what came back was this person's methylation was horrible. Now, this person had had a 23andMe a test done, and 23andMe, for those of you guys who don't know, they only test for one phase of the methylation pathway. There's a problem with that because there's 5 phases of methylation. So if we only check one phase of the methylation pathway, we're only checking 1/5 of the problem. And the issue is that companies like 23andMe will tell you, oh, but this one phase covers most of the methylation pathway. That is not true, because I've gone through the studies and actually looked at the percentages of reduction that each phase includes, and I manually calculate that on my patients. So I manually calculated this. According to 23andMe, this person only had like a 10% deficit in methylation. And that's no problem. Anybody can live with that. But when I calculated the 5 phases of methylation, this person had over a 90% deficit in methylation. Well, what does that mean for this person? This means that they don't detoxify well. They don't control neuroinflammation well. It means that they don't produce neurotransmitters like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, melatonin, GABA, all of the neurotransmitters that are helpful for calming and controlling mood and controlling focus. So one of the first things I did was we started working on the methylation immediately. Within a couple of weeks, we got 65 to 70% improvement in anxiety. I then went to the neurotransmitter genes and we started working on those. And we started adding in different supplements that would actually support the genes that were out of balance. And we got another 30 to 35% of the way. So I then went to inflammation, because that was a big one for this particular person. And they had a lot of neuroinflammation genetics, and we were able to get them 100% of the way, controlling their anxiety within as little as 12 weeks. Now, this person had spent years in the mainstream medical system without any benefits, but that's the power of using natural supplementation, but knowing which supplements to use for the genetic imbalances that you have. This is huge, guys. It's cutting edge technology. It's the field of science is called nutrigenomics, and it's growing like crazy. And I hope you're going to see more health professionals implementing this in day-to-day practice. But I have a feeling, as slow as things change, it's going to be a long time before that does. So as we wrap up, I would like to make our listeners aware of something new that's coming down the pipe. I'm going to be starting a boot camp. It's going to be in May. I'll be making an announcement about that really, really soon. It's called the Gene Hack Boot Camp. And in that boot camp, I'm going to be teaching you in 5 days live. This is not going to be pre-recorded. This is going to be live. But in 5 days, I'm going to be teaching you how to get a base knowledge of understanding of which genes could potentially be out of whack. Obviously, in 5 days, I don't have time to test. But if you want to work with me after that, we can work together and come up with a solution and get the testing done. But in this 5 days, you're going to have a keen understanding of where you are. You're going to have a keen understanding according to the 5 zones that I've developed, this assessment that I've developed over time. You're going to understand which zone is out of balance, and you're going to understand which genes need to be looked at within those zones in order to move forward. So I want you to put that on your radar. Keep that in the back of your mind. This is going to be a really exciting boot camp. I can't wait to launch it. I've got it already fleshed out, and we're just working on the back end infrastructure with building out the web page and the emails and so on and so forth. So keep that on your radar. That's coming in May, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about that really, really, really soon. Other thing is, on the Genesis Zone show. Oh, by the way, and if you have any questions about that, feel free to message me. You can message me on my website at drbriangBrown.com/question if you have any questions about that boot camp, or you can direct message me on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Brian G. Brown. Be glad to answer any questions. Be glad to put you on an early notification list, whatever you would like. So that wraps it up for today. Tune in next Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time for our next Wellness Warrior segment, where I'll be interviewing another surprise guest, and we'll continue exploring ways in which you can optimize for higher performance. Most informed, most trusted, and most grateful you spent this time with us today. Until next time, stay in the zone. I'm Dr. Brian Brown.